Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Frank Perry, longtime Kenosha Unified Audio-Visual Coordinator and member of the Kenosha Education Association. Thank you for joining me today. Can you tell me about how your family came to be in Kenosha?
My father came, I don't know when he came over, but his brother and him had a grocery store on 52nd and 33rd.
Okay.
And he worked, his brother ran the grocery store, and he worked at Anaconda
American Brass? What
Yes.
did he do there? Do you remember what his job was?
Well, as far as I recall, he was a crane operator. He operated a crane, moving material from one end of the
material
factory.
from one end to the other factory. Okay. And where did you were born in Kenosha then?
I was born in Kenosha, born actually in the back room of the grocery store. At that time, midwives were popular. People didn't go to the hospital to be born.
Did you have any siblings, brothers or sisters?
I didn't have any brothers and sisters until I was 9 years old.
Okay.
But unusually, my brother's 9 years younger, and my sister is 17 years younger than I am.
Okay. It's a big difference.
Yes, big difference.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school at McKinley. To start out, we started out with portables. McKinley, an unusual situation. The junior high was in the building, and the elementary grades were in a portable. Kindergarten was the only one in the building.
So you had a self-enclosed room outside of the building where
Right.
you went to school.
Portables. One room, one grade there.
Okay. And the bathrooms
The
were?
bathrooms for us were outside too.
In a separate
In
building.
a separate building.
Okay. And what was it like? What was it like going to school in a portable? Did it feel the same as in a classroom, or did it feel different?
Well, it felt different because there was no passing of other students. You were isolated for the whole day. You were in the
confined?
same room, confined to the same room.
And then how long did you go to school in portables?
I went all the way to almost junior high, to 7th grade, but at that time we moved to there around 5th grade. I think it was around 5th grade we moved
And you changed schools?
and I went to Columbus School, which is still as a building.
Okay. And after elementary school then, where did you go to junior high?
First, I started out at Lincoln, and then again we moved again. My father built a grocery store on 43rd and 52nd. So then I went about a semester at Lincoln, and then I went back to McKinley, but in the building.
Okay. And where did you actually live? Did you live in the grocery store? Or did you
We
have a
lived in the
house?
back, at that time we lived in the back of the grocery store. That's no longer there at 52nd and 43rd.
Okay. And what was the neighborhood like?
What was very, what would you say, sparse? There was, we were at the corner of 43rd. East of us was one home, and west of us there was an open field until for a couple of years, and then a person built a home. And across the street was one or two buildings. Walmart and nothing was there actually. We were pretty rural.
Okay. So you didn't have a lot of neighborhood friends?
No, I have none.
None. So, and you being 7 years older than your brother and much older than your sister, who were your friends? Who did you play with?
Oh, I didn't. But I spent my time in the grocery store.
Oh, and what did you do in the grocery store?
Well, I did cleaning, stocking the shelves, and waiting on customers.
Did you enjoy any of that?
It wasn't that bad. It was unusual too that my dad got a couple of gasoline pumps, and I had pumped gas too.
Okay.
I remember the price of gas for $1, you get almost 3 gallons.
And where did you go to high school then?
Then I went to high school, Kenosha High School. That's the only school in town.
Okay. And you graduated in what year?
1952.
Okay. And then what did you do after high school?
I went to school. I went to
Go ahead.
University of Wisconsin at Madison.
And what were you studying?
I was going to study to be an electrical engineer, and I wasn't able to. Mentally, and didn't have the capacity for the
math?
spatial acquisition and math.
So you changed to what kind of a degree?
I changed history and English as majors.
Okay. And then after you graduated with those degrees, did you go looking for a job?
No, because it was during the Korean War, and in my junior year, I was called up for a physical, but I was there, and I asked for a deferment because I was classified 1A. I was in the Army Reserves. I said, I will do active duty after I graduate. So I graduated, and I didn't look for any jobs because I went and applied for active duty.
What year was that?
That was in '56.
Okay. And you went?
I went for my physical and all that, and had the physical, and they said, come back in the afternoon, the doctor will talk to you. I thought, who was doing the physical? It wasn't the doctor, I guess. And so I came back in the afternoon, and the doctor talked to me, looked at me, and he says, you got a rash here. He said, did that happen? I said, usually in August that happens. And he said, well, we're going to classify you as 4F, unfit for duty.
For a rash?
4F. I said, why, doctor? You're too nervous. I thought maybe my eyes, but he says, you're too nervous. So I guess they didn't need me.
Did you feel like you were too nervous to serve?
I didn't know. I was just stunned, and I didn't apply for a job. I didn't have to. What do I do now?
What did you do?
So I went home, and I called the Wisconsin Department of Education, is anybody looking for jobs? And they gave me a list of openings. People needed someone there. And it ended up in Spencer, Wisconsin, outside of Marshfield, north of Marshfield.
Okay. And how long were you there?
Just a year I was there.
And what changed from
Well,
that time?
we're a very rural community, a very small community. Also, my father had suffered a stroke, and he wasn't getting any better there. So I came home to help my mother.
Okay. And then how long did you take care of your mom and make sure all that was good?
That was very good. I got a job in an elementary school district at Prairie Lane, and my father, I don't know how many years after, passed away. He had, I think it was 1960 that he passed away. He had a heart attack, and I was at school, and they called me. The doctor called me and says, come home, and he said, don't hurry, your father's gone.
Was that a shock?
Yeah, it was there, because he had had a stroke, but he was, as far as physically, he was able to do things. He couldn't talk too well, and he couldn't eat too well. I think the left side of his their throat there, but otherwise, it was pretty good health considering.
And at that time at Prairie Lane, it was a different school district than Unified?
It wasn't the Unified wasn't in existence. We had they were called joint districts. Kenosha was a joint district, and there was a school board, but as far as the budget was concerned, it had to go through the city council.
Okay.
There.
For Prairie Lane or for the
No,
Kenosha?
for the unified.
Right. And
The
then for
Prairie Lane had its own joint district, and the school board.
Its own school board.
Its own school board, and they set the budget.
Okay.
And Summers also had another joint district. They were a joint.
So how
they
many
were
schools?
unconsolidated.
How many schools were involved with Prairie Lane?
At least 3 others. They were just elementary. We were sort of like a junior high, but or maybe what you would call a middle school.
Okay. And after children left Prairie Lane, where did they go to high school?
They went to they would go to the junior high school. They would leave at 8th grade and go to the usually Lincoln, because that's where Prairie Lane at that point, Lincoln Junior High.
Okay.
There. A lot of the rural schools, but they're same as the parochial school. They were 8th grade, and then they would go to the Kenosha district.
Okay. And
From
go
there.
to high school there.
Yes.
Okay. And how long did you teach at Prairie Lane?
I don't recall actually. Maybe
You started in '57, and
yeah,
you
started in '57 and about in the early '60s.
Okay. And what were you teaching at Prairie Lane?
I was teaching eighth grade,
Okay.
self-contained, what we call a self-contained classroom, where everything. We did have help. We had an art teacher and a music teacher for there.
Okay. And so then, did something come up that you would move to another school?
Yes, the idea that they wanted male teachers, so I got an extra stipend of $600 a year because I was a male teacher. The
When you were
women,
teaching 8th grade?
yes,
Oh, okay.
and they had another one. And well, it carried a lot of friction. My next door neighbor was a female married woman, but she didn't get the $600. And I had to talk to one of the school board members that I don't think it's fair that just because I'm a man, well, you're the head of the family. Well, that doesn't make a big difference. Well, we like to have male teachers.
Okay.
So I think I worked 2 years there, and then I just resigned. Because to go to work, and then my next door neighbor in the classroom, the female teacher, but she didn't earn the $600. She wasn't worth the $600.
Okay, so you resigned, and then what did you do?
I don't know. I really didn't do anything, and I got a call from someone who was teaching at the Summers district that was being consolidated, and she told me, because she knew me, very convoluted. I went to school with her son, and I don't know how she found out. She said, Summers is looking for teachers, why don't you apply? Okay. So she gave me the name of someone to do, and I did.
Okay. And how long were you there?
And I was there till, let's see, from 62 to about 65.
Right. And what happened then?
And what happened then there was a consolidation of all the districts. Summers and Pleasant Prairie became the Kenosha Unified District there. So they joined together in there. And again, this person's husband, who was teaching at Washington Junior High, said the principal is looking for a teacher. And she said, my husband suggested that you apply. And I did. I asked for a transfer. I interviewed with the principal, and I had to then ask for a transfer, and I got a transfer, and then I went to Washington Junior High, teaching
All right.
7th grade English and Social Studies.
And how long were you at Washington Junior High?
Until 71. And then again, someone suggested that the principal at Tremper High School is looking for someone in television, and you're doing this at Washington at that time, and so I talked to Dr. Hosmanic, and he said he would like to have me, and I got a transfer then in the middle of the year to in 71 to Tremper High School.
And your job at Tremper High School was what?
Was the television coordinator.
And what was that job?
That was the idea that I was supposed to help teachers learn how to use television in their classroom.
Was
Yeah.
this something brand new?
It was brand new, yes. It was more or less, what would you say, Dr. Hosmanic's idea that to do innovations and a different way of teaching, and he had a program for teachers and alt instructors, a release time to do different ways of teaching.
So using new tools.
Yes, new ways there.
Okay, and how was the school board in terms of using
Well,
television?
there was, I don't think they had any, what would you say, inkling. They had no, there was an incident. They didn't provide money, budget there.
They didn't provide money in the budget for the
No,
TVs?
but because television is very cost intensive. I mean, the equipment, the television sets, the school was wired for closed circuit, but you don't have television sets.
So how did the school?
We had two, and the school at that time, I think, was over 2,000 students. And I forget how many classrooms we had at that time, too.
You know, how long did you have just 2 television sets?
A couple of years, and then we had 4.
All the way up to 4.
Yeah, and then I think we ended up with maybe 6, at the most 8 at there.
Okay, and what were the first things you did as the instructor?
The most things that we were trying to get there was working with teachers, and I did work with the FIAD and music, performing, showing them, analyzing so they could do things.
So they would record something
Yes,
and then they would look at it?
Right, what the students, like when after school activities, say like the choraleers, they were practicing dance and movement, and then I would film them, record that, and then they would look at that and see their performance there.
Okay, and how long were you involved with the audio-visual aspect of education?
The rest of my career at Tremper.
And you retired then when?
In 1996.
Okay. And did anything change dramatically between 71 and 96?
Well, we did get a television equipment. We had a studio, and we ended up having a television course where students would do student productions.
Their own things.
And they ended up, they would produce a weekly activities, and they would run it on the educational channel.
Okay.
And then
On cable.
on cable over
Okay.
there.
So you were teaching and you were getting a job in audio-visual. Did you need to go to school for
Yes,
that?
I went to school in the middle 60s. I went to Stout and got a degree in AV,
Okay.
communications.
You were also involved with the Kenosha Education Association, correct?
Yes.
And when did you were a member when you first started
Yes,
as a unified person?
yes. We'd
Okay.
be doing.
When did you become actively involved?
I think it was after the two strikes
And
we had
When were those?
in the early 70s. There.
Okay, and why did you become involved
Well,
at that time?
I saw the leadership. The two strikes were run by teachers. We had an executive director, but I didn't see him. I mean, we had the last strike lasted a long time. We were at the Eagles, and we would have a meeting in the morning before we went to picket. But there was no executive director. It was all people. The strike organizers, the coordinators of every building spoke, but the executive director, which we were paying a lot of money, where was he?
Okay, and so
I ran for the building representative and to find out what does he do.
and you were elected?
Yes, I was
rep-
elected for.
And then, did you learn what the executive director did?
No, I didn't even dare, because then I ran for the board of directors as a senior high representative, and then got more involved, and so I was directly working with him at board meetings, and I found him. I thought he wasn't doing what he's supposed to do.
Okay.
So we weren't getting our money's worth.
Okay.
We were paying him a big salary.
Okay, and so
For
then-
us, looking at that,
Yeah, so now you're on the board of directors for the KEA. So what were some of the things you did to change this feeling about the executive director not really doing what you hired him to do?
well, was on the negotiating committee and really got involved there. And the situation was that in the meantime, other factors were changed there to the point that an incident happened where we were going to vote on a contract. We're meeting at Tremper High School, and all membership meeting there. District allowed it to meet, and we were going to go in, and I was going to speak in favor of accepting the proposal that the school board had given us.
And that, what was in that proposal that you were in favor of?
But the biggest thing is that we were able, at that time, and the law had changed, that we couldn't negotiate for class size.
Okay.
But this had a article that we could grieve if there was excessive there.
Okay, and was there something else in that proposal that you favored?
No, that was the main point. The money wasn't there. It was there, but that was there.
Okay,
And then they told me, "Well, you're not going to speak." I said, "Why not?" He says, "Well, we've decided." We decided that we're going to arbitration.
Was that the executive director and the negotiating committee?
Yeah, the executive told me. Well, who? Well, we hadn't had a meeting or anything.
Okay.
We had a caucus before that this is what we're going to present this proposal, and I'm going to speak in favor of it, and someone would speak some of the bad points of it there. But then, that was it astounded me and saying, why the change in there? So it must have been arranged by other people. There.
And then you went to arbitration.
They voted no, they voted to go to the arbitration, and we went to arbitration.
Okay. And the result?
We lost.
Okay. So you didn't have this grievance for class size?
Yeah, we couldn't do that. We lost that there, class size. There'd be there's no recourse there. And in the meantime, other things have happened there. The representatives or the small group of teachers belong to the American Federation of Teachers. and they got enough signers in the petition to call for a bargaining election. Who would be really the official representative of the teachers?
So there were two
KEA or the
Okay.
AFT.
Okay, and what happened with the petition?
The petition there, when we went there, they had enough signatures, and we had an election.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what happened at the
We
results?
won. We won by a big majority, I think almost 2-1 that was there.
Okay, and then who became the representative for the teachers?
The Kenosha Education to say the official sanctioned representative there.
Okay.
And I was the president there at that time, there. And I remember at the meeting, they say, "You're one, well, but now you got to negotiate the contract." Yeah. And so, in the meantime, during the bargaining election, National Education Association had sent a representative. They didn't want to lose us, It's bargaining there, and
So did something happen in this contract during the negotiations? You said we needed somebody to represent us. What happened to the executive director?
And that it happened to him because during the bargaining election, like I said, the NEA sent a representative down from probably almost from Washington to say, how is this election going? I mean, are you secure? And he asked me, if the executive director was gone, would that help the election? I says, yes.
Okay, and was the executive director gone then?
He did resign.
Okay, and so you were without an executive
Right,
director?
so
during the contract?
we won the election, we had no executive director, and the Wisconsin Education Association sent us
A negotiator.
a negotiator in
Okay.
there.
And then what was the result of that contract?
And she did solve the contract, we had the contract, and actually we've got one of the best as far as compensation for one in a long time.
Okay. Did it take longer than with an executive director? Or?
One of the shortest ones we ever had.
And after that, was it usually quick solutions to contracts?
Yeah, because when we got our new executive, yes, they were much better. And he led the team.
Okay.
So,
So you were there when there was a rough patch with the
very-
leadership
yeah,
and
right. The leadership, the executive director wasn't doing really negotiating. There was a negotiating team, but they seemed to be independent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after your service in the Kenosha Education Association, things ran smoother for many, many years
Yes.
after that. Okay. And today, are things going well?
Well, as well as they can be because of Act 10.
Oh,
That
okay.
you're limited to there. The big thing is that you have to recertify every year
Okay.
as your bargaining agent, and you're not allowed to negotiate for any fringe benefits for retirement contribution or health contribution.
Okay.
And there's been a court ruling that seems to be unfair and unequitable.
The ruling said that it was not fair to the teachers and other public workers.
Especially that some of the employees in protective services, some of the people that the classification when they couldn't bargain.
Okay. So has this changed then?
Well,
recently?
it will be. It's going to be in the courts again there.
Okay.
Because it saves a lot of money for the taxpayer, but in the long run, it's very detrimental because we've seen many districts have to go to referendums for money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the last election, there were over 130 districts asking to increase the levy limits for a period of time, and a lot of them are just for maintenance. Just the buildings, do roofs or something like that.
Okay. So
more to come as those
Yes,
districts
it
deal with
is.
that.
Yeah, it's a bad omen in the sense that it spills over to so many other things. Where the Supreme Court in Wisconsin, if it's conservative, Republican, the factors there.
So it could change with any court change.
Yes, which isn't right, because the Act 10 said you can't bargain for these things, and you have no say at all. And also, when you recertify every time, you have to have a supermajority, not 50% of people who voted. You have to have 51% of the eligible voters.
Okay, so if not enough of the eligible voters
You vote, even yet
then,
there.
even then, a 50%
Yes.
isn't enough.
So you're really and it's a cost too
Right.
to certify that. So many school districts don't have really an official representative there.
All right, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been very enjoyable. A lot of reminiscing of things that happened in my past.